Imagine you have been wearing a tight, unwashed neoprene wetsuit every single day of your life.
Oh, wow. Sounds terrible.
Right. But you wear it to the office, you sleep in it, you eat in it. And over the years, you actually kind of adapt.
Yeah, you just be used to it.
Exactly. You stop actively noticing the chafing or the restriction or, the way it traps heat and sweat against your skin.
You basically just consider that baseline level of discomfort to be normal, like the normal human condition.
Yes. And today, we're doing a deep dive into a theory that argues the very air in your living room, the ambient environment you, the listener, are sitting in right now, is functioning exactly like that wetsuit.
It's a pretty wild concept to wrap your head around at first.
It really is. It argues that your environment is slowly, almost invisibly, suffocating your body's largest organ.
Which completely reframes the modern conversation around environmental health. I mean, entirely.
Yeah, because we usually just think of air purifiers as appliances to protect our lungs, right? Like from smog or wildfire smoke.
Right. We are very accustomed to a highly reactive, pathology-driven medical framework. We look for acute toxins.
Or we look for a respiratory disease.
Exactly. We look for the jagged white line on the X-ray. And if the X-ray is clear, well, we assume the environment is perfectly fine.
But the stack of sources we are diving into today, specifically these really deeply philosophical and physiological dialogues by a thinker named Fuchi Wu, they argue that our diagnostic criteria are basically fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, Wu introduces what is termed a life environment theory.
Right, focusing on this concept of the little heaven environment. And really, our mission for today's deep dive is to completely shatter how you, the curious mind joining us, think about clean air.
Because Wu argues that true environmental purity is not just about breathing easier. It's really about liberating the entire human organism from a lifelong, invisible state of oppression.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the transition from focusing on the lungs to focusing on the skin is like the first major paradigm shift in Wu's work.
It is. To understand how a spatial environment alters the whole systemic function of the body, we have to analyze our largest continuous point of contact with that space.
The skin.
Right, the skin. And it is not merely a static biological wrapper just keeping our organs contained.
Like a plastic bag.
Exactly. It's not a plastic bag. It is a highly complex, dynamic sensory net and regulatory organ. I mean, it is densely packed with sweat glands, sebaceous glands, hair follicles, and just a vast array of nociceptors and mechanoreceptors.
And those receptors have a really demanding job constantly. They're, managing thermoregulation, maintaining the acid mantle, and just continuously sampling the external chemical environment.
And that sampling process, that is exactly where the modern indoor environment becomes highly problematic.
Because of what we're putting in the air.
Right. We basically spend our lives immersed in air filled with micropollutants. We are talking about PM2.5 particles, volatile organic compounds.
VOCs.
Yeah, the VOCs off-gassing from the adhesives in our furniture or the flame retardants in our carpets.
The synthetic polymers in our wall paint.
Exactly. And in a standard indoor environment, these invisible compounds just settle onto the skin.
Which creates a literal physical and chemical reaction right on the surface of the body. Wu's notes describe this using a really evocative concept called skin shackles.
Skin shackles. It's a great term.
It is, because your sebaceous glands are constantly secreting sebum to protect the skin barrier. But when that sebum mixes with all this airborne microdust and chemical volatiles,
it oxidizes.
Yes, it essentially forms this microscopic inflammatory crust.
And that crust physically occludes the pores and follicles.
Huh?
But honestly, more importantly, it triggers a continuous sensory alarm.
Like a siren going off.
Pretty much. The free nerve endings in the skin interpret this chemical mixture and this follicular blockage as a localized breach of the boundary layer.
Wow.
So they send these subtle, continuous distress signals up the spinal cord to the brain. Your sensory network is literally under a low-grade, unrelenting attack.
Just constantly reporting that the external environment is dirty, hostile, and compromising the barrier.
Right, which leads perfectly to Wu's concept of pore liberation.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
The theory suggests that when you exist in a truly purified little heaven environment, where those VOCs and particulates are entirely stripped from the air, your skin isn't just like hygienically clean.
The sensory alarm bells finally just shut off.
Exactly. The nociceptors stop firing those micro distress signals. The entire surface of your body experiences a profound neurological relaxation. The environmental friction is just removed.
And the skin returns to its natural, unburdened physiological baseline.
Precisely.
Wait, so if my skin and pores feel better, the source says my liver and kidneys suddenly work better too. How does that leap actually happen?
Yeah.
Because going from a relaxed epidermis to a supercharged liver, that requires a really concrete biological mechanism.
It does sound like a jump, but what's fascinating here is that the mechanism bridging the skin's sensory network to the internal organs is the autonomic nervous system.
Okay, the master switch.
Right, the master switch. We are all familiar with the sympathetic and parasympathetic states, fight or flight versus rest and digest.
Sure.
But in modern environmental medicine, we are rarely dealing with acute life or death sympathetic triggers. We are mostly dealing with allostatic load.
Which is basically the cumulative wear and tear on the body from chronic stress.
Exactly. It's low-grade stress.
No.
So instead of a predator triggering a massive adrenaline dump, it is the continuous microstress of those VOCs and trapped sebum keeping the body in a chronic state of sympathetic arousal.
That makes so much sense.
When the skin's nociceptors continuously signal that the external environment is hostile, your hypothalamus interprets this data and maintains a baseline sympathetic tone.
And what does that actually look like physically, like inside the body?
It means mild chronic vasoconstriction. The body subtly shunts blood flow away from the splanchnic circulation.
I mean, the blood vessels supplying the gastrointestinal tract, the liver, and the kidneys.
Yes. It redirects that blood toward the skeletal muscles in the periphery. The whole organism is preemptively bracing for a threat.
Meaning, those internal filtration organs are operating with reduced blood flow, basically day in and day out.
They're functioning in a seriously compromised state. I mean, your liver and kidneys are your primary filtration systems. They clear metabolic waste.
And external toxins?
Right. So when you are sitting in a stuffy, VOC-heavy room, not only are those organs forced to process the actual chemical pollutants inhaled through your lungs and absorbed through your skin.
They're forced to do it while their own blood supply is being restricted by the body's defensive posturing.
Exactly. They are starved of resources while doing extra work.
That perfectly frames the overtime insight from Wu's text. Because in a pristine, little heaven environment, your internal organs don't magically gain superpowers.
No, they don't.
They just simply stop working overtime. When the pores are liberated and the lungs detect pure air, the brain finally receives the all-clear signal.
The autonomic master switch flips.
Right, over to parasympathetic dominance. Vasoconstriction ceases. Normal blood flow returns to the organs, and the liver and kidneys no longer have to filter an endless stream of environmental garbage.
They're just allowed to return to their normal, natural baseline.
Which is huge.
It is. The organs are no longer suppressed by the spatial environment, which raises a really crucial question. If your nervous system is suppressing your internal organs and maintaining this muscular tension day after day, year after year, what is the cumulative toll on the human body over decades?
Oh, here's where it gets really interesting. This leads directly into one of the most compelling thought experiments in the source material. The twin analogy.
I love this analogy.
It perfectly illustrates Wu's concept of a life-shaping environment because, we usually view our genetic code as this unalterable destiny, like a fixed architectural blueprint.
Right. We think genes dictate the exact outcome. But Wu argues that genes are merely the seeds.
And the physical environment is the soil, the water, and the atmospheric pressure that dictates exactly how or even if those seeds actually unfold.
And epigenetics demonstrates this beautifully. Let's look at the twin analogy. Imagine you have identical twins with the exact same DNA.
Okay.
Twin A grows up in a standard, compromised, modern environment. High ambient noise, poor air quality, volatile chemicals off-gassing everywhere.
Just a normal city apartment, basically.
Right. And twin B is raised in a perfectly regulated, pristine, little heaven environment.
Okay, so what happens?
Fast forward 3 decades. Their physical structures, their baseline neurology, their biological ages, they will have diverged drastically.
Because twin A's body has basically spent 30 years in a state of allostatic overload, trapped in survival mode.
Exactly. Wu uses the term shrinking to describe what happens to a body trapped in that defensive posture.
And it's not just about, losing physical height.
No, it is a structural and cellular compression. The muscles maintain chronic fascial restriction. The breathing mechanics default to shallow chest breathing instead of deep diaphragmatic breathing.
And the skin ages faster because of the continuous oxidative stress.
Yes. The body is constantly diverting energy resources away from cellular repair and neurogenesis just to maintain its defensive walls.
It's literally compressing itself to survive the daily onslaught of its own living room. That is terrifying.
It is, but twin B, conversely, is allowed to unfold. Because their parasympathetic nervous system is dominant, their deep wave sleep is actually restorative.
Which allows for maximum growth hormone release and efficient cellular repair.
Right. The fascial network remains open and expansive.
You know, the text makes a profound distinction here about the actual goal of this pristine environment. It isn't some, Silicon Valley biohacking protocol designed to artificially extend human life to 150 years.
Right, it's not about becoming immortal.
Wu states that long life isn't about turning a human into a Superman. It's just about stopping the daily push toward death.
I mean, that is perfectly stated. It is simply getting the environmental friction out of the way so the body stops accumulating these daily micro-injuries.
So what does this all mean for how we experience comfort at home? Because human neurology is wired for adaptation, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like when we normally try to engineer comfort, say buying a high-end massage chair or stepping into a really hot shower, the sensation is incredible at first, but it inevitably fades. We build a tolerance.
The novelty wears off fast.
Yeah, the comfort just becomes the new, boring baseline.
Yeah.
So does this concept of pore liberation just kind of fade into the background noise once your nervous system gets used to the clean air?
That is the practical question, isn't it? If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text draws a really rigorous neurological line between two distinct concepts: stimulation and liberation.
Okay, so the massage chair is a stimulation.
Yes, the massage chair and the hot shower are stimulations. They are intense external inputs designed to force a biochemical spike, usually involving dopamine or endorphins.
And the biological reality of a stimulus is receptor downregulation.
Exactly. The nervous system intentionally fatigues to external inputs so it doesn't get overwhelmed. You adapt to the hot water, so you literally have to turn the dial up just to feel the same warmth.
The classic hedonic treadmill. You are always chasing that initial peak.
But that is exactly the opposite of liberation. Liberation is not the introduction of a new, pleasing stimulus. It is the absolute cessation of a chronic stress signal.
Oh, wow.
Right. The comfort of a perfectly pure, temperature-regulated environment does not trigger a sudden dopamine spike. It establishes continuous homeostasis.
So walk me through the mechanics of that continuous loop. If it's not a dopamine hit, what is your brain actually experiencing when you just sit in a little heaven environment?
Well, your brain is experiencing the continuous absence of pain signaling in the spinal cord.
But we don't feel like we're in pain in a normal room.
Because we are so numb to the environmental oppression of our standard indoor air, because we are so used to that tight wetsuit, we don't consciously register the low-grade signaling as pain.
We just register it as like a vague heaviness or brain fog.
Yeah, or mild irritability, yeah. But when a perfectly clean, properly humidified breeze interacts with your liberated pores, it provides continuous sensory confirmation to the brain that the boundary layer is secure.
You know, Wu specifically highlights the fluid dynamics of this airflow and really contrasts it with standard air conditioning.
Oh, standard AC is brutal on the skin.
Yeah, because conventional AC pushes air that is thermally harsh, extremely dry, and often carries particulate matter from a stale filter.
Which is just swapping one form of environmental oppression for another. A blast of cold, dry AC air triggers the skin's cold thermoreceptors. It forces the body to initiate defense mechanisms all over again.
It strips moisture from the epidermis.
The skin literally recoils.
But the airflow in a little heaven environment matches the skin's requirement for cooling without triggering those defenses.
Right, and every time that pure, gentle air moves across the mechanoreceptors on your skin, it doesn't cause receptor fatigue.
Because you don't build a tolerance to not being under attack.
Exactly. The nervous system just registers the relief over and over again. The text describes it as the whole body continuously cheering.
Not from a thrill, but just from resting in its natural state of freedom.
And that continuous stream of physiological relief is the ultimate marker of a true life-shaping environment.
Which really challenges you to do a rigorous self-audit of your own living space.
It absolutely does. Next time you feel inexplicably tired, irritable, or tense in your own home, ask yourself, is your body just quietly exhausting itself trying to survive the air in your room?
Are your pores physically shackled by VOCs and dust? Is your home literally forcing your internal organs to divert vital energy into defending the perimeter?
It fundamentally changes the definition of wellness, doesn't it?
Totally. It suggests that true health isn't achieved by adding more things to your routine.
Right, not more supplements or more intense workouts or forced stimulations to shock the system.
It is achieved by subtraction. It's about removing the invisible daily environmental friction so your human organism can finally run the autonomic repair programs it was designed to run. You basically just have to take off the dirty wetsuit.
Which really leaves us contemplating the broader implications of Wu's work. We have normalized the biological tax of compromised environments to such an extreme degree that we consider the resulting physical limitations to be just standard human traits.
And that leads to a deeply provocative question. Something for you to explore long after this deep dive ends. If the average human has spent their entire life physically shrunk and in a defensive survival mode due to modern environments, what latent natural human abilities, senses, or levels of genius might we unlock if a whole generation were raised entirely in a liberated environment?
It really makes you wonder. We have spent decades looking for the jagged white lines on the X-ray to tell us what is broken.
But perhaps the real diagnosis isn't that humanity is fundamentally fragile. Perhaps we have simply never given the human blueprint the atmospheric space it needs to fully become itself.